So now the idea is that we wait for folks to sign in to it'll take them a while to get to sign in. It is muted, it looks like. Let's see.
Yeah, I didn't hear you, Aaron.
Yeah, we lost you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
There you are.
Okay. Yep.
Don't do that.
Whatever button that was, let's avoid that button.
You people are settling in right now, so we're going to give it a second.
Okay. Do we see that there are people in here?
No, but they can already see and hear us.
But saying you can see that there are people participating in this, that they're there.
New York can see, so they're letting me know.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Okay, I see. There's a chat function. I see what's going on. Hi, Brandon. We see you in the chat. Aha. Oh, I don't need that. I'll take that away. There we go.
Hi, everyone. We're just giving it one more second. Okay. Hi, everyone that's out there. I am Erin Frankenheimer, an Entertainment Relations Manager here in New Orleans, Louisiana. I work for TuneCore, and we are going to be speaking about distribution and shedding some light on how to best handle your distribution and what it all means. Our music industry expert, Neil Spielberg, and musician Ron Pope. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And also, folks who are on the line, you guys can start submitting questions using the Q&A feature there. Anytime, we're going to get to those the last 10-15 minutes of the session. But let's jump right in. Let's start by getting to know the two of you. We're going to start with your origin stories, if you don't mind. Give us a bit of background on who you are and how you got to where you are in your career. And Neil, I'm going to have you go first because I really like where you first cut your teeth in entertainment.
Well,
go ahead.
All right. Originally, I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Moved to Miami for junior and senior high school with my family. Went off to college at University of Arizona in Tucson. I was a mass comm major there and did a lot of prepping for my career while I was in college, concert committee, sold radio advertising, and so on. And interestingly enough, one of the clients at the radio station turned out to be my first gig. And while I knew since I was 13 that I wanted to be in the music business, I had to take a little detour. And that detour ended up being Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Circus. And aside from the fact that I had red hair, no, I was not a clown. I was a regional marketing director, better known as an advance man in the circus. And it's now called Feld Entertainment, by the way, because they have more than just Ringling. They have Disney on Ice and Monster Truck Jam and a lot of other family entertainment shows. But my desire to be in the music business kept me driven towards that. And my actual dream as a kid was to work for Warner Brothers Records. And I just thought they had the coolest artists and the coolest promos and everything. So I worked towards that and got in there in Atlanta. And I was with our distribution company, Warner Electric Atlantic, better known as WEA, W-E-A. They moved me to Nashville in '83, and as of next week, I'll be here 36 years. About a year and a half into my distribution life as a local regional sales rep, I was asked to join Warner Brothers Records. And there was only one difference. I said this to you earlier. Only one difference between Ringling Brothers and Warner Brothers. At Ringling, all the animals were in cages. A little rim shot there. Anyhow, it was an amazing 21 years at Warner Brothers. Loved every minute, almost every minute of it. Worked with some of the greatest artists in the business, specifically in country music, but that and beyond. When I first got there, we signed 2 new artists named Randy Travis and Dwight Yoakam. Wow. But we had Hank Williams Jr. and Emmylou Harris, and to name a few. And then along the way was Faith Hill and Jeff Foxworthy, which is still the biggest selling comedy album of all time. games rednecks play, and you might be a redneck if. So very proud of that. In '03, I moved out of Warner. New management came in, and I was asked by Merle Haggard and his manager to help him put out his first independent album. And that was an easy decision to say yes. And helped him. He had a distributor already, but write the marketing plan and help sell it into retail. That led to a label called Equity Music Group, which was formed by Clint Black and some of his partners. And while we weren't as successful as we would have loved to have been for Clint, we broke a little group called Little Big Town. I was in charge of the distribution, liaison, and so on, and a few other acts like that, a few other artists and individual labels and individual indie artists. Around 2010, my career took another turn and went into management, which felt like a natural progression for me. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I can't wait for us to start picking your brain. And Ron, can you tell us about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I kind of grew up and came of age right at when the conventional music industry kind of exploded or imploded, I guess. I don't know what you'd call it. When the internet really emerged as a force in the entertainment industry, I guess we were kind of there at the beginning of that. My brother is an early adopter of all things technological. And at some point he said to me, "Hey, you have to put your music on this thing that we're using. It's called MySpace." And I was like, "Oh man, you already got me on one of these websites. It's the same as that other one." He was using Friendster at the time, which was one of the first social media platforms. And but my brother was like, "Oh, there's bands on there. It's really cool." And so I was really I began to become an early adopter of all of these things on the internet. I had always, I had grown up thinking I was going to participate in the conventional music business. I was in a band. I played shows in crummy places, and we made demos. And the idea at that point was there were the haves and the have-nots. You were either a have, you were in the Rolling Stones, you had a major label deal, you had distribution to get the record in stores, you had the money to hire a big producer and go into a fancy studio and have a global marketing campaign and all the things that are necessary to promote something on a grand scale. Or you were a have-not, you were a band trying to get that. There really was no kind of a middle ground, and we, as the internet began to happen, we became sort of the emerging middle class of the music business. And so one of my friends was one of the first, or one of the early interns at TuneCore when we were still in college. And so he said, "Oh, you can use this platform to upload your music, and then you can sell it on iTunes." And that was at that point the primary mode of music consumption for most people that were getting digital music. So I got very popular on the internet. I used TuneCore to load my music onto, put them in all these places and all the stores that there were. And so in the beginning, as I kind of emerged in a big way on the internet, we really were kind of at the forefront of, the social media thing for entertainers. So we got big on MySpace, and then all the other social media platforms as they emerged, we got popular in those spaces as well. And so my immediate question was, now how do we turn this into money? How does this become a job? And that's what we used TuneCore for. So we started selling, many digital singles and albums. So we sold, a few million digital tracks and lots of albums. And then while this was happening, we had to click the box to distribute my music to whatever new stores come up. And one day I had a fairly sizable amount of money in my TuneCore account from a website from a DSP that I had never heard of. And so I called my friend Jake, who used to work there. I called Jake on the phone and I was like, "Hey, I've got all this money in my account from this thing. It's called Spotify. I don't know what it is. If I take it out, I'm not giving it back. So can you just make sure this isn't a glitch before I steal?" And he was like, "No, dude, this is now it's the primary mode of music consumption in Sweden." And at that point, Sweden was like, in terms of creating revenue, it was like a desert for recorded music, because they had gotten into piracy so much earlier than other places. It was so entrenched in the culture. You couldn't make 10 cents selling music in Sweden. And so it was really very striking to see all of a sudden millions of people in this small country were consuming my music, and it was generating real revenue. And so that helped us emerge in a big way in Europe. We went from, kind of testing out a handful of markets to, headlining on festivals, playing for 50,000 people that knew all the words to all the songs in Sweden. And it's really allowed us to emerge in a meaningful way. And then my wife, who had been managing me kind of on the side, and then she started managing me full time. And then we realized we were, I was producing records and writing songs and doing my artist projects, and she was managing people. We realized, for me, we were functionally operating as a record label, and we were doing all these other services for other people. So we decided to combine it into one place. So we started a label called Brooklyn Basement Records, and we started it in our basement in Brooklyn. And since then, we've moved to Nashville. We have signed a number of artists. My career is still, kind of the central driving thing. Finances our ability to foster the careers of these artists that we believe in. And so that we've expanded that. We have a few full-time employees and built our office here in Nashville, and have a few artists on the label, and have been experimenting now with providing all the services of a label without owning masters for some artists. We're doing kind of marketing partnerships with artists that have their stuff together. Kind of like it's I want to say it's like, there's like give a man a fish or teach a man to fish. We're like giving somebody some fish and teaching them to fish at the same time. And then eventually they don't need our help with the fish. That's the idea. That's kind of what we're doing. So, so we're doing a whole bunch of stuff over here. And now I'm making a new record, and we're going to be releasing new music next month. So we're doing music business, doing it all. That's right.
Cool. That's amazing. From your basement. So we're here to talk about distribution, and thank you both for sharing that. Let's go back to the way that it used to be so we can better understand the way it is now. Neil, would you mind sharing with us from your veteran perspective how distribution used to work and how you would define distribution before it was digital?
Wow. We worked, I worked at a major for quite a while. But there was basically three major, it's down to three majors now, I'm sorry. There were at one point 7 majors out there, believe it or not, and each of them had their own distribution company. Warner had WEA, Sony Music, MCA Distribution, and so on. And we would, from the label side, we would create the music. We would work with our distributor to get the product from manufacturing to their warehouses, and from their warehouses it would ship out to mass merchants, Kmart, Walmart, Best Buy, Target, and then also all the independent retail stores and big chains, Tower Records, Camelot Music, Record Bar, and on and on and on, and wonderful indie institutions like we have here in Nashville. And that's how we got the music from manufacturing to distributor to the retailer.
And how's that changed?
Dramatically. Most of those people I just mentioned, those companies I just mentioned, are no longer in business, unfortunately. It's changed dramatically. There's fewer places to physically go by. And by the way, it's not all bad, but it has been a disruptor. The digital age has been a bit disruptor in the way we distribute music. And there was a very rough time that the industry went through as all these stores were closing left and right. Big chains that were anywhere from 1,000 locations to 600 locations, whatever. Tower, who was the place to buy music as a record chain globally. They actually still are in business over in Japan, I believe, and some other markets overseas. but it changed dramatically. The biggest challenge we had, let me go back to that, in the physical world was, we could manufacture, ship, market, promote, publicize, and everything, but especially at the mass merchants, that last 90 feet was the worst. Meaning, once it got to the back door of a Walmart, Target, or Kmart, sometimes it never found its way to the shelf. And we would have artists in town, and the bin might be empty. And that is not good, obviously, for a lot of reasons. And it caused a lot of feelings hurt, lost money, and so on, because an artist or their representative would go into a store, or a family member, and I would get those calls. I'm in, East Jesus, Idaho, or whatever, and my record's not here. And right away the assumption was, well, that must be the case everywhere, when in fact it really wasn't. But that was the thing. Plus, when you look back at where it was versus now you have 24-hour virtual inventory at your fingertips. You have the entire history of music at your fingertips to consume, download, whatever you want to do. Back then it was, 9 a.m. till 7 or 9 p.m. And you were at the mercy of whether that store was in stock or out of stock on your project. So that's probably the biggest change there. The fact that now we have 24-hour virtual inventory, and there's no shipping of product. I mean, very minimal. And by the way, I don't want to dismiss the fact that we have wonderful independent retailers out there, but digital has completely taken over I'd say completely, virtually taken over the music business. And again, as an artist manager now, I love that I can go online at any time of the day or night and go find what I want to listen to.
Yeah, it's great. Especially, you don't think about that if you're, watching a show and there's a song you like, you could just get on your phone
Absolutely.
and find it. If you're at a show and you don't get to grab the merch, it's a really great point. Ron, let's talk about your first experiences distributing your music, please. How did you get your first product recorded? That's a big part of the whole distribution process, is having something to distribute.
Well, the first record, I had been making music for a long time, and this is a part of my process over the length of my career has been, like I said, kind of, we were coming from the notion that the traditional music business was going to exist for us. So in making my first record, we'll have to hire a producer, and we have to ask someone. Like, you used to have to ask for a lot of assistant permission to do almost anything in the music business. And so I started, that's what we were doing. Like, I didn't know that we were making a record, my first record with my band, that we were going to distribute on the internet. That wasn't even a thing when I started doing that. Well, they found TuneCore. You're gone.
Oh, your voice is gone.
I think it's muted again.
We can't hear you, Aaron. Sorry.
You have to click on your microphone button again?
I'm so sorry.
You are.
I should know that right off the top of my head. I believe it is 12 or 13 years, but I'm getting an answer. So.
Well, in 2003 is kind of when the digital distribution started.
And now I got onto TuneCore in 2007, I believe. But so, yeah, when I was first, beginning to make my first record, people didn't know, if it was if there was access to digital distribution for independent artists. No, I didn't know anybody that knew about it. So I was making a record thinking like, we're going to kick this around, we'll sell it at our shows. And so over the course of my process, through the many years and the many records we've made, we went from, the whole was asking for permission. Like, we were hoping maybe somebody would take this record and we could utilize traditional distribution to get it into stores one day if we found a record deal. And over time, as we were making records, we stopped hiring producers. I started producing the records myself. every place that there was a middleman, we took those out. And so that's really what digital distribution did for me. The first number of years of my career as I was making records, we kept asking for permission. We needed somebody to approve of us within the music business. Some grown-up had to make a decision on us. And then at a certain point, because of social media and my access to easy to use digital distribution, we were able to we grew a global audience, and we were able to create whatever we wanted, and as long as it satisfied those people within the audience, they would consume it, and then that would fund us continuing to make art. So no more producers, no more looking for record deals, no more dealing with trying to figure out how to get a record in stores. We didn't need the record in the stores. The people that were consuming our music, they weren't going to stores to get their music. And so that really, I can't overstate the value that the digital distribution has had on my career, because I spent years trying to go the traditional route, and then every gatekeeper that had the opportunity to say no to me said no to me. And but I knew that we were doing something good, and I believed in it. And sure enough, social media allowed us to prove that in the world. And so then it didn't matter. It's like if you're selling records, or you're getting streams, you're generating revenue, you don't need some senior vice president of A&R somewhere to stake their career on you so that you can make your music. You can just make your music then. And that's been an incredible blessing for us, because there's just no way to, I'm 35 years old, married, I have a child. Like, you can't create music all day, every day in the way that I do if you can't get money for it. It's my job. Like, I would have to go do something else to feed my family. And so I cannot overstate the value that digital distribution and the digital revolution in the music industry has had for me.
Thank you for that. And to answer your question, it is 13 years. 2006 is when TuneCore started. Well, when we launched. So thank you for asking that.
He was an early adopter, just like his brother.
Yeah. And so once you got that recorded, how did you decide? I think you said earlier when you were talking about, how you got started, how did you decide? Is it going to be a single, an LP, an EP?
I mean, in the beginning, like I said, I was at the growing up with the mindset that we were going to participate in the conventional music industry. So to start, we were just making albums. Each time we'd be like, well, we're making another record, and we would make a full-length album, and then we would just put it out. And now I would say our approach is kind of a middle ground between that and the modern, like, we're just going to keep putting out singles thing. So like what we do, we record a full-length album, and we will gradually roll out songs. So over the course of a given period of time, depends on the album how long that will be, we will roll out songs one at a time as digital singles, and then eventually put out a full-length album's worth of material. And then oftentimes, once that's out, we then will roll out more recordings from the process of while we were making the album, kind of B-sides, and then we will eventually release a deluxe edition. Like with my last album, Work, we put out a number of singles, and then after, 6 months of rolling those out, we then put out a full-length album that had 10 songs on it, and then we started releasing more of the songs from the process, and then we put out a deluxe edition of the record that had, I think, 20 songs or 19 songs in the end. And so that's another thing that the digital landscape, allows you to do. It's like, for an artist like me, I can't imagine that, we're not doing the kind of volume that would make it so that, we're going to get like the super deluxe edition of the album, in the Target, where they're going to take, put it right next to the original copy of the record. But there's a lot of people, these, super fans that want this stuff, that want to consume my stuff much more regularly and are excited to hear more of it. We can keep giving it to them. And that's, that helps. I think in today's landscape, one of the things that's really important is like realizing that you're not going to serve every fan with the same thing. You're not going to service the needs of all the people that are consuming your music with one particular thing. Like, some people are going to consume the single, and that's what they want, and that's all. And they're listening to things in playlists. It's passive listening, whatever. And some people are, medium fans. They want to hear the album. They'll maybe they'll check out a few of the singles before the record comes out. And then there are people who like are walking around with a sweatshirt with your face on it, and you're in the first paragraph where they describe themselves like, I'm Lisa, I'm an accountant, and I love, and then they say the name of the artist that they love. Like you're in the first few. It's like, oh, and by the way, and I have 3 kids, and I'm married to Doug. It's like you're up there. You're like at the front line of that. And so for those people, one of the benefits of the the digital distribution is that you can keep rolling stuff out. It's not cost prohibitive for you to keep putting out music and keep satisfying those people, and continuing to search for something that if you're looking for a single that really lands with people, you can just keep rolling them out. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. There's no person that you have to ask. And to some extent, I will say this, like, one thing that was positive in the conventional music business in the past was that people had to say, should we do this? Nobody has to say that anymore. Like, now you can just put out anything. And I know for me, there's sometimes, like, looking back at now the many albums of my career where I'm like, maybe we didn't need to put that one out. I don't know. But there was nobody to say, should we do this? Because it's there's nothing prohibitive about it. You could keep releasing things. And so that's, there are pros and cons, obviously. I've seen largely pros, of course, because it's allowed me to, have a career. But I don't want to sound like, I'm like I hate the conventional music business.
No, I appreciate that, and explaining all of that's really helpful. And you kind of already tapped into this, but when do you decide? Is it because you're doing this as you want to, and you have all this freedom, and you're able to release the singles as you want, and to release the album and do these great things like the deluxe album? When do you feel like you're ready to have your music heard, and what steps do you take then to promote it?
Well, for me, because I'm doing all the things that you imagine, a musician is doing. I'm doing those things. This is not like you could have a bedroom project these days, I guess, in this landscape where you never take it outside. Like for me, I go out in the world, I play my music all over the world. We go on tour. And so it's there's a lot of planning, and this really has little to nothing to do with me at this point. To be fair, Blair does this, and the team here at the label, they really work on this. But it's like we put together a plan that's a year or 18 months or 2 years. That's like the record's going to get done now. We're going to start rolling out singles at this point. Videos are going to start coming out, lyric videos, whatever other content around the songs that we're creating. We're going to announce the tour on this date with tickets going on sale on this date, and so on and so on. Blair made incredibly detailed plans so that we're not, we don't just finish the record and throw it out on the internet and call it, because I think that's something that it's very hard to make good music, of course, but then it's incredibly hard to make good music and promote it. That's obviously, it's like if I knew how much business was going to be in my music business, like I'd have gone to school to be an accountant or a lawyer or something. Like I wanted to just be in the music, and then I ended up in the music business because the landscape changed and I had no choice. And so I think developing a clear-cut plan is very important, and that's something that we take very seriously and take kind of more seriously and are more meticulous with each year, because it's expensive to promote a record. It's expensive to make a record, and so if you're going to spend all that time and energy and money on something, it feels like at the very least, you should be as organized as possible when you release it. So yeah, we put together a plan. It's very careful and very particular, and we, try to roll things out, to keep people interested. Basically, like we slowly roll everything out. Because I also think if you put out 30 songs in a day, unless you're Drake, a lot of people, it's hard to get people's interest, and hard to get even people who really like you. It's hard to get them to consume 2 hours worth of your music all at once. But if you gradually roll out singles, you can whet people's appetite for a longer form thing. So.
Thank you. And just a reminder, everyone who's watching right now, you can submit questions as we're going through this using the Q&A tab there. Feel free to send them in as they pop into your mind. Neil, being in the industry at a time when independent artists didn't have access to distribution tools like this, like they do today, how did you feel the shift? How did you and your network of peers feel the shift in the industry? Was there an aha moment you can kind of point at?
I don't know if there was an aha moment. I think each artist grabbed onto it at a different period. I know as I was working with artists and or labels and saw these opportunities, to the exact point that Ron said earlier about, you reduce the number of no's in front of you. You take the gatekeepers not out of the picture, but you reduce the impact of those gatekeepers. It's just a wonderful opportunity to have control of your release date, when you want to put out, as Ron was talking about, rolling out single after single. You're not, if you're at a label, chances are if you're at a label, you're one of several artists or many artists, and therefore you are at the mercy of the label's schedule. And you may have something in the works and the plans as far as how you want to roll things out. They may have a whole different timeline, and often that doesn't work well. Not saying that it doesn't work. Majors do a good job for the most part in that, but it gives independent artists a total flexibility of they control their release schedule and rollout schedule and marketing. They're not beholden to a bigger entity. So
yeah, it's a lot more freedom when you have this.
A lot more freedom, yeah.
At the fingertips. And Ron, you have a large fan base outside of the U.S., and a big part of the appeal of using a service like TuneCore is that you can get your music heard worldwide. How has distributing to platforms outside of the U.S. helped your global reach? And I think you spoke to that earlier with Sweden, but is there anything else you can add to that?
Well, one of the things that we have really been really, we were blessed with, I guess we were very lucky to happen to be there at the time. It's like as Spotify first opened up, to international, independent artists, and we got on there at the very beginning. And then, it was like kind of a perfect storm for me because I already had a few songs that were, kind of very popular within the internet, but I wasn't a household name. And so people could say to one another, "Oh, have you heard of Ron Pope, or have you heard one of these songs?" And someone would say, "Well, no." And then they could go to Spotify and they could listen to my entire catalog. So as a result, it turned people in these countries, these first handful of countries that had access to Spotify, they became fans of the catalog. They became fans of me as an artist and not of a particular single, because there was no barrier to entry. Like listening to the single was just as easy for them as listening to 8 hours of my music at that point. They didn't have to pay $1 for every song that they heard or something. They just went, they had Spotify, they went in, they listened. That was it. And so I would say, that so as that, that was happening in Europe, we were able to use the analytics. Spotify didn't even have analytics then, to be fair. They were so stoked that we were, having this incredible success in there, and it didn't even exist in America yet. So they were so excited that we were stoked about it, that we were like, we would love some analytics. We would love information. They're like, that's so cool. We don't do that. We don't know if we have that. Tell us what exactly you want, and we'll see if we can get it for you. And so we were able to kind of that's how early we were in there, is we were able to, kind of explain to them what we wanted. And they were, they tried to figure it out. And mostly it was like a jumble of information that, again, Blair is a wizard. And so she was able to parcel through all this information, and we were able to figure out places in Europe where there was a bunch of consumption of my music within the platform. And we're like, wow, it seems like we have to go to Oslo. Like, I don't know. Or wow, there's a lot of people listening to me in Hamburg. And so we started touring in Europe based on information that we gathered from the analytics that we were getting from Spotify. And so we tested. So the first thing we did was we went to London and we did, like we were going to put one show, like a very small acoustic show in London on sale, just to see if anybody would show up. So we put it on sale. It sold out in, like a minute. So then we put a double the size venue, still a pretty small little club, on sale. That sold out in 5 minutes. So then we're like, okay, well, let's see if we can throw in some other cities in England where people are consuming the music. So we put a Nottingham show on sale. That sold out. We put a Manchester show on sale. That sold out. And so then, we came home, and 6 months later, 4 months later, we went back to Europe, and we did like 6 markets or something. We went to Stockholm. That sold out. We went to Oslo. That sold out. And on and on and on like this. It told us where to test markets because people were consuming my music. We were able to see those things. And, in some places it hasn't been, gangbusters like that where we're selling out the shows in 5 minutes, but it has shown us like, oh, we could go to this place and it seems like there's a bunch of people that are interested. And, in some markets, we've gone there and it's been, positive, but not overwhelming in the way that some of that was. So it's like, it's not only just to see like where you can sell 1,000 tickets. It's like, you might see that maybe this is a city where I can sell, 50% of the amount of tickets I normally sell. That's stuff that, creates value because the world is very large. And, so maybe, I don't know, like maybe Berlin is the answer for you, when you live in Baltimore, but the only way to find out is to go. And for me, the only way to know to invest the money to go, it has been to follow the analytics. So I can't overstate the value of that for us. And it also has allowed us to show, festival promoters and people like that, in this country where there is this many people, this percentage of those people is listening to me. So, no, I shouldn't be on this stage. I should be on this stage. Things like that, just to be able to show people those numbers has been incredibly valuable for us.
That's really amazing. And I was going to ask you later, both of you, I wonder what it would be. We were going to ask, do you distribute to identify your audience, or do you find your audience before you distribute? And Ron, you kind of answered that you were able to distribute and figure out where your audience was. Do you ever find, Neil, have you ever seen it kind of the other way?
Yeah, we actually had a case in point where we had an artist that I managed on a large indie label. And I want to point out to people watching today that while TuneCore is known for their indie artist distribution, they do have labels that use TuneCore for distribution. I'm not going to get into who all these people were, but we were at a large Nashville indie label who did not have an international distribution option. And our artist was booked on a large festival, country music festival in Australia. And we were faced with, look, you've got to open up distribution over there. And they weren't ready to do that. So I came to Shelby Kennedy at TuneCore Nashville and said, hey, if we can get the label to agree while they're figuring out what they want to do distribution-wise, can we release this artist record? It was an EP on TuneCore through in Australia and New Zealand because of the activity there. And it wasn't just the tour date. Again, and like Ron said, it's a whole marketing plan. Once the tour date was secured, that's when the real work began. And we got on, we did all the press we could possibly do. We just did everything marketing, turned on the machine, so to speak. And when we landed in Australia, we happened to be the #1 country song in the country, which was fabulous there. And they don't have much of a radio infrastructure. It's more about your video being #1 over there. So it was a great, and TuneCore had about 8 weeks prior to us getting over there, worked with the label and got us a distribution deal over there. And it worked so well that TuneCore ended up working with that label and distributed their entire catalog around the world outside of the U.S. Until they made a new arrangement several years later. So it was a great option for us. That's how we use TuneCore, a great example of getting our music out there way in advance of having an audience there. So
very cool. Yeah, and plenty of entities use TuneCore. People like you had started, Ron, in their basements are using it. Labels use us, managers, anyone who wants to get their music out there. So, Neil, how has the audience and artist fan base changed with digital distribution?
how has the audience changed? Well, the real basic answer to that is we've gone from an album-based industry. Well, if you're going way back, you're going from a singles based world to an album world for the last 40, 50 years, and now we're back to a singles based world. Yes, people do full albums, and there's great music being put out that should be listened to in its entirety. But in the mass numbers, it really has become a singles business. Just people's attention span has shortened dramatically, and they just want to go in and hear a particular song. Like you mentioned earlier, you're watching TV, you hear it on the background or in the foreground of a TV show or a movie that you're watching, or even a commercial, and you go look for it on whatever DSP you decide to use or that you subscribe.
Yeah.
And so I was going to say, I went, in thinking about the singles versus album thing, I would argue that one of the things that happened as we introduced the album and made the album the centerpiece of what we marketed, we took away the lowest, the cost entry point into recorded music. A kid could hear a single on the radio and they want it. And that Breakfast at Tiffany's song that was a big hit in the 90s. A lot of people heard that song, and now they would have consumed the single and they would have enjoyed it. And at that point, that record sold like 2 or 3 million copies on the strength of that one very popular single. And like, I don't remember what the rest of that record was like, so I can't really speak to it. But I bet a lot of people just wanted that one song. And so by taking away the access to the single, the music industry essentially created the landscape that made piracy seem like a good idea to people. They're like, I just want this one song. Why do I have to buy an $18 CD? So CD prices keep going up. There's limited singles because there's for a record label to distribute a CD single costs about the same as it did to distribute a full-length album, that was $18, So I would say that kind of created created the landscape through, that like the stage was set for piracy from that. So I think people always wanted singles. We just, as a business, we were telling them no for a long time, and that's
we were selling them $18 or $19 singles.
Yeah,
what we were doing.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Thank you for jumping in there. And this question's for both of you. Why do you think? I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but why do you think more artists are moving towards the independent model?
Well, again, I think Ron said it great. It's to take away a lot of the roadblocks, a lot of the gatekeeper that gives us more freedom to release music when we want to, how we want to, and
what it sounds like
is enough that every artist has their own marketing plan or should have their own marketing plan. There is no, cookie cutter thing that some people believe happens in our business. So it really gives us back the flexibility and the freedom to release music when we want and how we want.
And think about something like Old Town Road. This is an unconventional sounding recording by an artist that refuses to be defined from an industry that like requires that you be defined. And this is a guy who's like, I'm myself. I'm doing this, and that's been one of the most popular songs in America for quite a while now, and people are pretty stoked on it. And I can't imagine
it's like froze, or I froze.
I still see me. Does everybody else?
Neil's frozen, but we can hear you.
But I hear you, Neil. Can you hear us? Hello, I'm here.
Continue.
Okay, Aaron, you can hear me? Okay. So Old Town Road, I think, is an example of something where, like, that's a very unconventional thing. He's doing something that is absolutely unique and genre bending, and it's not like some kind of like fringy thing that has like 100 fans, really stoked on it, spread around the country. Became one of the most popular songs certainly in the country, I don't know, but possibly in the world. And so that's really something that the traditional, you're not going to get in the traditional music business. You're not going to get like a kid who is bending genres in that way and doing something that unique. You're not going to get those kind of opportunities straight out of the gate. I would imagine at a major. I mean, like, I knew someone who had like a big global number one, and then had another big hit, and this is like 12 years ago or something like that. Big giant hit songs, and the major that he was on was like, I just don't know if it's worth it to spend the money to make an album for him. Like, I don't know if it's just the songs, like if it's like like at what point it'll be worth it for us to like invest in him to put out more songs. So this guy was like jockeying with these people that didn't understand how the music industry was working at that point, trying to get them to allow him to make a record when he had proven that he had fans all over the world that, were taking his records to the very top of the charts. It's like that, that part is I think what drives a lot of people to be independent. And it's challenging. No one has taken themselves all the way to the top of the mountain as an independent artist. Like, that's still what major labels are great at. They're great at taking something all the way through the roof to into the to the stars, like all the way up. And so that's something that really nobody has done on their own. And anybody that it looks like they've done it themselves, there's really there's been a major involved in some capacity, whether they're using the radio department of a major or whatever. So that's something that's like, at some point, it seems like in your process, if you're hoping to be, Beyonce, no one has become Beyonce without the assistance of a major. But a lot of people have created in the last 15 years these meaningful careers for themselves, doing things that a major label wouldn't let you do, and that's what happened to me.
Yeah. And there are some really significant, substantial artists that do use our services that have great teams in place that once you have those kind of moving pieces, like you were saying, they have like the outfit of what a major would be, all those departments.
Yeah, like at this point, we have, there are 4 full-time employees at my label, and so there's somebody doing a lot of graphic design stuff, and there's somebody doing like creating video content, and there's somebody doing outreach to brands and PR. Like, there's a lot of stuff, there are a lot of things happening here. I have a booking agent, one in America, one outside of America. There are a lot of people that work with us, but at the core, like being an independent, there are lots of ways to be independent, it's at this juncture. And so, like, some people, when I started, my independent thing was me alone, like all by myself in my bedroom doing this and working with TuneCore and distributing my music and doing everything myself. And then over the years, the team has grown because the like my project has grown to a place where it would be impossible to do everything myself. And that's something that, I mean, there's Jay-Z records in TuneCore, there's a lot of stuff going on in there. So,
well, I'm going to throw it to some audience questions, and thank you for answering that one for us. But some of the viewers that are watching right now have some questions, and actually I think this is a great one for what you were just talking about. This one comes from Jack. What promotion tactics do labels use that independent artists might not think to use when promoting their new music?
What do labels use that independent artists might not use? The pitch tool in Spotify, I would say that's one. Like, you use the pitch tool and you can look it up, and like rolling out your singles to pitch at playlists. I think people assume that it's like people that get on playlists, they like know somebody, and that, they know a person in programming at Spotify that like does them a favor. And most of the stuff in my interaction with the people who work at Spotify, that I've gathered this, most of the stuff that ends up on playlists is stuff that gets submitted through the pitch tool in the conventional way that you can look up and learn how to do yourself. And like, so as you're rolling out singles, you should pitch every single one of them. Think about where they make sense, and then pitch them and roll them out. Roll them out in a, slowly, because that's another thing that people at majors are thinking about, like within streaming services, like how can you utilize how the algorithms work, let's say, to help yourself. Like if you are, like we're talking about Spotify. So if you're using Spotify, if you are regularly rolling out singles, you'll then end up in the release radar of the people that are already listening to you on a more regular basis, obviously, because you're releasing music more regularly. And something like that, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more opportunities that you have in that release radar for someone, the more likely you are to release something that they would like, because they already like you. Now it's just a question of which one of your new songs reacts for them. So stuff like that, like being mindful of how you can utilize the way that the services already work, like, and read about the best practices in every one of these services, and then do all that stuff. It's free, it's easy, and that's something that somebody in digital at a record label is working on. But you can do that yourself. There's no reason why you can't, follow the best practices of Amazon and Apple Music and Spotify and Deezer, whatever everybody's using. You can follow the best practices, look up what you should be doing, and then do those things. And also, as you advance your project, don't be afraid to reach out to people at these companies and ask them questions, and they can direct you to places where you can find out about best practices. And that's all stuff like that I have always been doing myself, like even when it was just me on my own, that you can do by yourself, and it really helps. I think that's something that's very meaningful that you can do. Neil's back.
So Neil's back. That's great. Well, thank you for that, and nice to see your face again, Neil. So we're taking audience questions now. So I'm going to jump to another one. This one's from Edward. What budget would you suggest I use for promotion as an independent artist?
Oh man, well that has to do with like what, how much money you have, because the answer is all the money that you can afford to spend. Promo is incredibly meaningful, of course. The most important thing you can do before you decide about spending money is to put together a plan, a very careful plan, because you don't want to waste your money. You don't want to throw money around, like, buying $1 million worth of Facebook ads. If you don't have a clear-cut plan and you're not targeting them in the right way, probably won't help you in a meaningful way. So I think it's important to consider, what are the artists that you admire, the people who are, not the iconic artists that are 100 steps ahead of you, the people that are the next step up ahead of you and the next step above them. What are they doing? Look at those things and then, reverse engineer that, figure out how to do that, what that costs. Because like, there's as Neil said before, there's no cookie cutter answer to how to do this, and how you promote one of my records, 15 years into me making albums, and is very, also that, there's an established global fan base. So that's different than how, even within my team, how we promote something for an artist who's making their second album, or an artist who's making their first album, or, artists in different genres, so that how much you should spend is a very complicated question. It has to do with a lot of factors. But yeah, I would say looking at the people that are just a few steps ahead of you and seeing what they're doing, that you can find a lot of information there.
Yeah,
that's great advice.
Yeah, and to that, we actually have a question here that asks, do you think artists of different genres need to use different promotional tactics to target their audience?
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know who that was for.
Oh, go for it, Neil.
Go ahead. This is for both of y'all. It's just questions.
The answer is absolutely. There's a lot of different platforms available based on genre, although we don't necessarily want to pigeonhole any artist, as Ron talked about earlier, like Lil Nas X. There are, from video outlets to blogs to you name it. There's just so many different outlets. Media outlets, both traditional and new media. There's just a lot of different places to go with this. And again, I challenge each artist to look at their thing and look at low-hanging fruit where they can be exposed. At the end of the day, the idea is still to get your music in front of people, and you have to find ways to make that happen. Tastemakers that are out there. Again, blogs are a great way to open doors out there. It's just everyone has a different media plan or marketing plan. Excuse me.
I would say also, this is something that we've always been very mindful of. It's much easier to make noise within a space when you're early to it. Like, look for things that are new, because everybody's like, okay, how do I get on Rap Caviar on Spotify? Right. Well, that's really cool, and it's great for Drake to be on Rap Caviar. But if it's your first single, probably you're going to need to do some other stuff before you take your single and put it on Rap Caviar. And so I think like right now, it's hard to get attention paid to you in a big platform that's existed for a number of years. So thinking at any time about what is new and what you can do, in a platform that is, that isn't crowded by the biggest artists in the world, yet they're not all flooding all their energies. Major labels aren't pouring all their money into it and clouding the space. We got lucky a bunch of times with this. We were early in MySpace, and then I was with like one of the first artists with a Facebook page and things, like doing those things. Like now, yes, everybody is doing those things, but it's hard to make something meaningful happen in a lot of spaces that are big for yourself. So thinking about what is new, ask the people around you that consume the kind of music you make, where they're learning about stuff. Ask people what social media platforms they're using. See, and like, don't be afraid to ask your 12-year-old cousin, like, are you doing something? Like, look at the apps that I have. Are you doing something in social media that I'm not? And they are. Like, if you're 19 and you have a 12-year-old cousin, they're doing something in the internet that you aren't yet. Like, they have an app you don't know about. And so, and every minute that you're older than that, like the 12-year-old people are doing something very different than you. And so I think it's incredibly valuable to be paying attention to those things, because you're going to need to access people, to start in the easiest way possible. Whatever is the path of least resistance for you to reach people, that's what you should do. Because like at majors, they have the luxury of having a fortune, and unless you're and a staff of people that have information about how the music industry worked, up until this morning, and what you have is that as a new artist that's lucky, I guess, is that you don't have any of the baggage that comes with knowing everything that happened in the music industry up until this morning, and so you can just go and try new stuff, and there's nobody to say, that won't work because we tried, this in 2004, and you don't care. Try the new thing. It's like SoundCloud rappers don't care that the DJ of 5 years ago created this sound and set the stage for him, and they're just making new stuff, doing new things. And so, yeah, I can't stress that enough. Go new places, try new stuff.
Well, if I could add to that, a couple of the artists I work with have distinct hobbies or are good at certain sports like golf. And I'm always looking for, is there a way to get that artist's music into that world where it's not overly cluttered by music, but may stand out because of their talent? I mean, it's a scratch golfer, and he has relationships with people in the golf world, whether it's equipment, whether it's pro golfers or whatever. And if they can get one of their pro golfer buddies to Instagram or whatever about a song that they like by this artist, all of a sudden you got a large group of people that consume music but aren't being bombarded with it in that world. And we look for opportunities in there as well.
Yeah, for us, we've also we have, as we have become friendly with people who consume the music over the years, who have audiences, like my friend Carly Bible, who is a gigantic influencer in the internet, has been a big fan and was an early adopter to my music, has been an early supporter. She has been an ardent supporter for many, many years. Lots of people who go to Carly's page to learn about different makeup, how to do makeup, or also, about fashion. They aren't there to hear about music, but then they hear the songs, and she's always been such a fan. we just have met, countless people over the years who say, "Oh, I heard about this from Carly." And exactly to your point, because they're in a space, they're not being bombarded by music. There's, it's not, they're not on like a DSP, where they're consuming music and they're constantly hit with playlists. It's just they're in a space where they're comfortable, they're living their lives, and then they happen to be exposed to music, and it's by someone that they trust. Also,
It's exactly what I was going to say. And someone that they trust recommended your music.
Yeah, and I think like in the, like I would say there are lots of places in the internet where things are promoted. There are influencers that do, and it does not feel the most organic, and so it helps if it's like integrated, like and something that feels natural. Like Carly is my friend, and she likes my music, so it's not weird for her to share my music with people and to speak about it because she cares about it. It's she's not. It's not like she's trying to sell people a jet ski and she's afraid of the water or something. She's my friend and she likes my music, so it feels very natural. And people can tell. Like people can tell she's not trying to sell them something. She's just telling them about it because she likes it, and so that's an example, in my own life it's been very, very positive.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And we're butting up here to the end. So I'm just going to take one more question from the list, and please hang out because I have a little announcement for everyone watching. We have a little something for you. Just one question from Melissa. Is it a huge mistake to put your music only on platforms where it can be purchased versus streaming?
Oh yeah. You want to go first, Neil? Or you want me to go? I'm sorry.
The answer is, oh yeah. I couldn't agree with you.
Come back, Neil.
Well, I'll start while Neil's frozen.
There he is.
Oh, there he is. Wait.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I don't know why. Internet's been fine all day until now. No, there's so many reasons to have your music out there where it can be purchased as well as streamed. Again, people go to different places at different times to listen to music, and you want to be found. Obviously, you want to be in front of as many eyeballs as possible. So I'm all about you distribute it, and you distribute it wide.
You're not going to change people's behavior. That's especially as a new artist. Like people, you need to be where people live in the internet. As a for instance, like there are things that I'm not particularly interested in. Like I don't watch lyric videos, as a for instance. Like I don't watch other people's lyric videos as entertainment for myself. But I understand that some people like to consume their music by sitting in front of YouTube and watching lyric videos. And so we create them because we want to go into that space where people live and people are consuming music, and we give it to them. And I think that, while obviously I would prefer to, I was one of the first independent artists to be making a real living selling digital albums and singles. And so I would love to go back to selling people albums on iTunes for $9.99. That was awesome for me. However, that doesn't exist. That's not the primary mode of music consumption in the internet anymore. And it's a bummer for me. But I'd also like to be able to sell people $18 CDs. That's not a thing either. So it's like you can lament the past, or you can participate in the present and look towards the future. And that's if you're trying to have a career in music, that's what you need to be doing, because that's the conventional music business made an incredible mistake, by not participating in the digital revolution as early as they could have. And as a result, it's like, something as simple as like when they squashed Napster, it was sort of like, remember the comedian Gallagher who he would hit the watermelon with the giant mallet? They sort of did that. All of the consumption of music, like the bulk of piracy, was in one place. It was in the watermelon. And then they hit the watermelon with a mallet, and then it was everywhere. They spread them out all over the internet. And so then it was, they couldn't wrangle it. It was people were pirating music everywhere. And so by not being careful and not being ready to participate in the future, they shot themselves in the foot in a big way. And to some extent, like we're still kind of recovering from that, I would say, and dealing with the repercussions of that incredible misstep on the part of the music business. And so I think that should be a lesson always to participate in now and be mindful of participating in the future of the music business, because you're not going to stop this train. It's going to keep moving forward.
Right.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here today, answering our questions, answering the audience's questions. And to the audience, thank you so much for joining us here for our first ever live session. Appreciate you guys hanging out. And as a thank you, we are offering everyone who's here today a 20% discount on distribution. So you'll be getting an email in the next couple of days, and that'll be coming to you. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you guys. Ron Pope, Neil Spielberg.
Thanks,
Thank you
Aaron.
for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Fun hanging out. Have a good day.
Bye.
Good one.